Right. Good evening and good night, and welcome to the It's Your Perspective Talk Show. It is Tuesday, June 9th, 2015. My name is David, a.k.a. Kimba, a.k.a. Christian, alongside
Keith, a.k.a. Wasai Edwards.
Yes, Keith is sitting in tonight. He's our special co-host, sitting in for Ross Soups. Ross Soup is on special assignment. He'll be back real soon. We do have a telephone number. You can reach us tonight, 340-201-9005. You can also text us on that same number as well. That number is 340-201-9005. Most importantly, you have to go to our website, streaminglivefromthevi.com. Go to that website and click on Watch Us Live, and guess what, man? You will see us live, and most importantly, you will see our guests live tonight. There they are right there. And Selma, John Ayala, and Dr. Alberto Caner. Is that how you pronounce that? Yes. Make sure you have that button pushed up there. Let's see here. Let's try that again one more time.
Cornier.
Yes, Cornier. Okay, there they are right there. Well, we'll get right back with them. I just want to say that we are coming to you guys here from the high-tech, low-tech studio. Beautiful island of St. Croix, Virgin Islands. No radio, no TV, internet only. People ask us all the time, what's our frequency, what's our channel? We have nothing like that. You have to go to our website, streaminglivefromthevi.com, in order to see our show. All our recorded live shows are on YouTube and Ustream.tv. Go to those respective sites, search for our channel, It's Your Perspective Talk Show, and you will see all our shows, roughly about 150 shows, dating back to April of 2014. Many guests have come on here to talk about many things. We have two Facebook pages, It's Your Perspective Talk Show and Streaming Live from the VI. So if you're on Facebook right now, give us a like. Definitely want to give a shout out to CHS class of 1982. That's the class that Keith and I are representing. Soda Soup. We also want to give a shout out to Vanessa of iGrade Records and Rhythms. Vanessa will be here next week, maybe Tuesday and Wednesday. Julie and Cherise King. Thank you, ladies, for helping us out in the past on our show. And to all our past guests, thanks for being on our show. Without you, we wouldn't have a show. We're on Twitter. Tweet with us on VI Perspective. And this show's mission is just simply to inform, entertain, and empower everyone. And at this point right here, Wasi, we normally do the poem. You want to say anything in particular right now?
Live and love and live. Be free.
Be free. Okay, that's it right there. So I just want to say a few things here before we get started. I want to give a quick shout out to Wasai, who was here last week doing co-hosting. We also had Audrey Brown. She sat in last week with our guests, and Selma. We had two other. We had Dr. Dora Hamilton and Dr. McDelia Bratwitt. They were on here as well. Definitely want to give a shout out to our other guests last week, Abel Bakar and Arthur Gary James was here as well last week. And one important note, I just want to say that hurricane season is in full effect. So that means that you have to get ready when you go to your local grocery store. Instead of buying 1 gallon of water, buy 3. Get your medications and your important papers and your diapers and all this stuff. Just multiply it by 3. You just want to make sure that you have enough, just in case we find ourselves without the basic essentials. No water, no WAPA, no power for many days.
In a time of emergency.
Yeah, in a time of emergency for sure, man. So on that note, we'll just leave it there. We do want to say welcome to our studio, our guest tonight, and Selma John Ayala and Dr. Alberto Caner. If I got that correct, there they are right there.
You did.
Thank you. Tonight's topic, I guess this is part 2, right? We had part 1 last week, and this week it continues on. Beauty from Ashes, the Trauma Symposium, which is going on here in the Virgin Islands from June 7th to June 14th, 2015. And we had some guests on with Anselma last week, and we have another guest this week. And so we want to say welcome back and welcome to our studio tonight. Thanks for coming out. We were having sort of a very spirited conversation before we started here. So, Anselma, I'll just let you kind of start a little bit on what's happening here, and we'll just kind of take it from there.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to call us at 340-201-9005.
That's it.
Okay, and you can text it also. Now, I have here with me Dr. Alberto Cornier. He's coming from Puerto Rico, and he'll be here to make sure that we understand the pediatric trauma that occurs in our children. Dr. Cornier is actually into genetics. And Dr. Cornier, how about you tell us a little more about yourself first?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation and the privilege of being on the Virgin Islands. Part of my family is Virgin Islander, and my sister lived here for many years. My niece and nephews live here, so although when I do not live here in full time, I am aware of the islands, and I love it. I was before the program started. We were just commenting that there's nowhere in the world that have more beautiful sunsets than the Virgin Islands, particularly St. Croix. And I have to say, both St. Croix and Frederiksted and Christiansted, but Frederiksted are to die for. Anyway, I'm a geneticist. I'm a pediatrician as well by training. I did my medical school in Puerto Rico, and so did I my pediatric training. And then I had the privilege to went to Harvard to do my genetic training, and I did clinical genetics, and then I have a PhD in molecular genetics as well. After that, I went back to Puerto Rico, and I've been an associate professor at all medical schools in Puerto Rico. As a matter of fact, I direct the DNA lab. That's how we call it. It's a molecular genetics laboratory, and I'm also the director of research at San Jorge Children's Hospital in San Juan. And I've been doing mostly clinical and basic science research. I'm mostly known for couple of genes that we have discovered related to the formation of the spine. So I'm very interested into congenital abnormalities and children's abnormality, but particularly the effect of the environment, and that includes toxic stress, into gene expression, and how that affects the formation of the body, but also how does that predispose you to have other medical problems later in your life.
Okay, well, I have a question for you. You said genetics. So let's talk about genetics as it pertains to trauma. Is there a relationship there?
There's something called, genetics is the field of medicine that it's in charge of studying all the information that you have in order to become a human being. How do you respond to an infection? Even a chikungunya or dengue fever, it's genetically predetermined in your body. So we are the professionals who study that component. Sometimes you're missing, you have mutations in your gene, and that predispose you to have lots of medical problems. But there's something called epigenetics, and epigenetics is how the environment and how other stuff affect the expression of the genes. For example, toxic stress, trauma, nutrition. All of those, and this is not something that I'm saying, this is something that has been proven in many, many studies, and we actually stress, and toxic stress in particular, changes the way the DNA is methylated. Methylation is the way that genetic information transduces into a protein. And because that's what genes are. Genes are proteins, and those proteins are the ones who predetermine how do we act, what diseases we're going to get, how do we handle pressure, how do we handle diseases. So everything, whether we like it or not, is genetic.
Okay, Dr. Cornier, as a geneticist that's well studied and well established in the field, have you ever, there's any studies done on how long does it take for a gene, I forget the term you use, for a gene to adapt to the stress and for it to be passed on, to be coded and then passed on to
that's a
the following generation?
Very good question. Genes, the thing with genes is we only have approximately 33,000 genes as humans. And so that's not a lot of genes. So we have genes that are multi-talented, meaning that they do different purposes or have different activities during our life. Meaning one gene can do something when you are an embryo, but then later in life would do another totally different thing, and then much later in life would do a third or a fourth or a fifth different activity. So genes depends on what they are or what are their functions. For example, we have genes that are pathways. Determine the pathways, kind of like a traffic light.
Yeah.
So you have the genes that they turn on, and that's like your green light for other genes to go ahead and express themselves. So stress changes the way those genes can turn on, or sometimes they don't turn on at all. And the problem with that is that you have many other genes that lost their way or their directions. So you have like this soup of genes there that are lost, and that traduces into a phenotype, and we call a phenotype clinical symptoms or manifestations. How long it takes for that genes to perpetually change, it varies. It varies from the type of genes that you have, and also most of the genes change their methylation or the way they express, depending in what type of life they're affected. I mean, if you have a toxic stress or a change in temperature or nutrition, and while you're an embryo, that will traduces into a congenital abnormality. For example, we know that just changes in temperature in the amniotic fluid by 1 degree are capable of causing a lot of problems. And the reason is 1 degree temperature changes in the amniotic fluid, it's a lot of stress. And genes cannot handle that stress. Will that keep permanently damaged? Yes, for that function. But later in life, that gene will have another function that may or may not be affected. So it's kind of complicated.
So, has there been any studies to like a particular behavior? How long does it take before it starts to until it becomes that what the word? Until it becomes dominant, you know, I mean, that it starts being expressed through the offspring, you know, like say, let's, you know, listening to a certain type of music, you know, I mean, a parent listening to a certain type of music. Mm-hmm. You have been done a study like how long does it take before, you know, I mean, that passes on to, you know, I mean, a new learning experience. You know, how long? Has there been any studies, you know, how?
I don't think there have been studies in terms of how long it takes, because that can change, I mean, from person to person and from gene to gene. Because, I mean, genes have different purposes, and depending what's the purpose and the length of the gene, that's the way it's changed, and how long it takes for that gene to be changed. Another thing, I may carry polymorphisms. What is a polymorphism? It's a change that is not a mutation itself, but predispose me to X, Y, or Z. And I need to have a X, Y, or Z, which most of the time are environmental factors, such as stress, such as lack of exercise, or too much exercise, etc., for that gene to change its behavior. And I call it behavioral, but really it's expression. So we don't know exactly how long it takes from gene to gene, because we are more interested in knowing how that protein expresses in the tissues under different stress circumstances. And that has been studied in disorders such as the predisposition for anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, mental disorders in general, toxic habits. We now know that there are genes and some particular information that predispose you to have a toxic personality, meaning that you're more predisposed to use drugs, or if you use a drug to get hooked on that drugs. There are people that are capable of using X, Y, or Z substance and they do not get hooked on that, or they can get out of that very easy, but others do not. And that is part because they have genetic information that may predisposes them for those circumstances.
I can agree to that. What about autism? That's the new thing that we're talking about lately. Has there been any genetic studies, that could link what is autism from a point of view of a geneticist? What is autism?
Autism. I'm so happy that you asked me that, because that's my second area of research. Autism. Autism is a dysfunction of the brain cell-to-cell brain communication, and so far, that the response that you get is not appropriate to the input that brain had. For example, most of those children are not retarded, The problem is not retardation. The problem is that they have an input or a stimuli, but the brain responds differently. And so forth, they start or doing stereotype movements with the hands, or doing circles at one point, or become anxious. So it's autism. It's the lack of or malconnection or malfunction of the neural circuits, particularly in the cortex of the brain, more so in the temporal lobes and the frontal lobes of the brain.
Let me ask you a question. So as we move forward here a little bit, and as it pertains to the symposium, how do we help? How do we help a young kid, 2-3 years old, or even younger than that, that's been identified with maybe some kind of trauma of some sort? How do we help?
Well, I think that the Anselma Jonajala and the government that she represents are doing the right thing, the right first step. And the first step is to educate, to acknowledge that if there's a problem. And if there's a problem, we need to identify which are the toxic stress that we have in our families, and empower our families. And I believe that education is empowerment. And education doesn't need to mean a degree, but education is knowledge. Knowledge sets you free, in my opinion.
Yes.
And we need to give these parents knowledge so they can recognize what is stressful to their kids, because sometimes there are even cultural stuff that are stressful, and we don't recognize them as such. And so we need to, this program is starting to do that, acknowledge the problem, trying to identify what are the stress factors in our society, and how can we help the families, the communities, the professionals. We need to establish a community networking. That's how we are going to help in the future these children. And the only thing we're doing that is because they are the adults of the future. And this is our society in 20-25 years.
Can you identify a few of the cultural stress factors that that we take as a norm that we don't identify that's really affecting our children? Can you identify a few of them?
You're more in this culture than I am.
I'll answer that, and it depends again on the culture that you're in. In our society, for example, we have a lot of words that are taboo. Stress being one of them, trauma being one of them. Lots of times, we tell our children, well, you're not going to talk my business. Okay, what happens here stays here. And then the child now doesn't know how to express themselves, because when they begin to express themselves, what happens is that, oh, okay, I don't want mommy to be upset with me, or I don't want daddy or grandma to be upset with me, so then maybe I'll just keep quiet and I'll just shut up. So then that child does not learn how to express themselves,
or even how to seek help,
or even how to seek help. Which was bring me to my second point, right? So here it is, we have that taboo. Now, because we have that taboo, I am in dire need of something. I notice that my parents, no matter what they need and how they need what they need, they will not ask for it. They will not ask for help, and they don't know where to begin to go for help. Okay, and sometimes help is just a phone call away. So this is another issue right here in our society, right here in our very own culture, in our territory.
If I can add to that, I'm gonna be speaking more based on Puerto Rican society, which is the one that I know better. But there's a lot of issues.
There's a lot of Puerto Ricans here.
I know.
Society,
I know.
So you'll be talking about, as sure as there's going to be issues that's not going to be alien to.
You know what?
To
human
the
beings,
yeah.
And this is from a fact. From a genetic point of view, we are 99.9 identical in our genes. It's only 0.1% of our genome that differentiate us. So we're pretty much brothers and sisters, all of us. It doesn't matter where we came from. But going back to toxic stress, we have a lot of domestic violence, and we have created a culture of anxiety, of stress in Puerto Rico as well. Everything has to be fast. Like the movies Fast and Furious, and being aggressive is being seen as a positive thing, And sometimes that aggression can translate into toxic stress. So another toxic habit that can, that will affect our children is that parents that drink a lot, or that they use drugs, or parents that are incarcerated for whatever reason. Those are stresses that will affect our children. And unfortunately, we know that alcoholism is part of our society, and it's normal. It's taken for granted that that is normal.
As you talk about alcohol, is there any proven studies that alcoholism is passed on genetically? You know what I mean?
There's some genetic predisposition, yes, indeed. And actually, there's some as well for autism. We have been studying that, and there genes and SNPs are single nucleotide polymorphisms on chromosome 7, on chromosome 11, on chromosome 15. Now we are studying a single mutation that we have found in girls with autism in Puerto Rican population. And we have already found that in 12 girls out of 18 that we have studied so far. So it seems to be very prevalent. And that just single nucleotide that is changed, it may be the cause, or at least the predisposition for these children to develop autism. So yes, you can you can inherit a predisposition to be an alcoholic, but also the problem with alcoholism and like most of the social and psychiatric problems or psychological is that it's kind of like a vicious cycle. That's what you learn when you were a child, and that's what you do as a parent. And that's what your parents learn from their grandparents. That alcoholism it's accepted, that if you become drunk, it's okay. If you become a little bit more anxious and maybe agitated because, well, he's drunk, don't pay attention to him. But that is causing stress to a 1, 2, or 3-year-old child that cannot understand that, the dynamics between that. So we need to get to know that can affect our children, and not only that but we're teaching them to do that, and that's terrible because we are imprinting that behavior in our future generations.
Dr. Cornell, I have a question for you. The grant that I work with, we look at birth to 3, and we even extend it a little bit to 5-year-olds too. Can a newborn baby experience any kind of trauma or stress?
Sure. Actually, the 0 to 12 month, it's a period that the genes, genetically speaking, stress is more harmful to children. Most people think that babies do not feel what is going on, or they don't know what they're going. They do. There's nothing worse than a mother that is going through a lot of anxiety or psychiatric problem, and the composition of the breast milk, if you are breastfeeding that baby, will change and will include more cytokines, which are substances that will stimulate your brain. So you are already transmitting that baby anxiety through your cytokines.
What about in the womb?
Yes. A lot of stress, and actually there are a lot of people studying autism from the perspective of stress while that baby was in the womb. And I think that at the end it probably will be a combination of factors, genetic predisposition, genetic abnormalities, in conjunction with stress, environment. I truly believe, and I don't have scientific proof for this, but I truly believe that there's something in our eating habits that are damaging our genes, particularly the brain system genes.
And someone wants to know, is asking about vaccines causing autism. Can you shed any light on that?
Sure. There is no proof whatsoever that vaccines causes autism. There's a lot of people, and unfortunately there was a paper that was published in the English journal Lancet many years ago, supposedly associating vaccine with the development of autistic features, but that was proved to be that it was just fabricated, and actually that causes the authors of that journal and that research to be disbarred from practicing medicine for their life, and it was retracted. That information was false. There is no proven data that vaccines cause any type of developmental abnormalities, and that include autism.
Okay. Does Puerto Rico have a program, or I guess a grant? Is that like what we have here, doctor,
I don't know.
He might
Maybe
know, but
Ansel-
I know. Yes, they do.
They do? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
You was talking about nutrition, and how it affects autism. Has there any been? You said that's from just a feeling, but do as a studied, what I mean, person, it has to be some more than a feeling, for you, 'cause it's not.
It's been studied in rats,
Yeah.
in mouse models, because you cannot study the human embryo brain cell function, because that will require for you to develop
cell
embryos
research, yeah.
and develop embryos in lab, and that is
Against the law.
It's unethical, and no institutional review board will approve such a research. But in mouse, we have proved that nutrition does make a difference, and they have developed autistic mouse models, and they know that mouse models that are, for example, exposed to GMOs, which is genetically modified food, has developed a much higher percentage of behavioral anomalies. And the reason is most of those GMOs, which are genetically modified organism or food, depending what's the type of modification that they get, some of them, they have in their genome, or that corn or wheat or whatever, they have inserted insecticides genes, and you are eating that.
No, I think you're the perfect person to ask this question. We use the word genetically modified versus what it really. Well, I'm not going to call it that. You're going to have to let me know if we can call it that. Could we use the term genetically mutated also in places? Well, we do use modified because it's more socially acceptable to, you know what I mean, and if we say, well, this is a genetically modified food versus a genetically mutated food, we'll have probably a more, because from my understanding, if you taking a gene from an animal, mutating with a gene from a plant, which is something that we don't really, I don't know, as a geneticist, you see that in nature. Is that a modification or is that really a mutation?
Well, there are different things. One thing is a mutation, and actually mutations happens all the time. Our human genome mutated at a rate of approximately 1 to 10 to the minus 8. So, and that is normal. And that is normal, and it's good because it promotes variation. We cannot be exactly the same all the time through the history of evolution, because then we will perish as a species.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that mutations don't necessarily mean a bad thing. Unfortunately, when that mutation means change, occurs in a portion of the genome that is extremely conserved and that is extremely important for the expression of a protein, then it will change that protein expression, and that will traduce into clinical manifestations.
Okay.
Genetic modification is that I am changing the natural genetic information of that organism. For example, corn. Do you know that above 90% of all the corn in the United States, it's genetically modified? And the reason they do this is because they insert a gene in the corn plant DNA structure that will produce insecticide. So that means that plant is going to be more tolerant to bugs and it will be produce more. And it's more, people who is planting is getting more, it's getting more money because they're going to have better corns and more.
Yeah.
And more.
Exactly. And that's a problem with this society, the word more. More doesn't necessarily means better. But anyway. So when you modify a genetic structure or individual, you may cause a mutation, but not necessarily. Because I'm inserting a gene or a genetic information. It doesn't have to be a gene. It could be just a sequence to do whatever I wanted to. For example, people think that these chickens that you buy in the supermarket, the ones who are huge, they're very large, huge chickens that you say they're triploid chickens, meaning they are being genetically modified, those embryos, to be triploids, which in humans will be the equivalent of a lot of problems. Which probably those poor chickens also have, but they just don't care.
They're triploids, diploids, or what are humans?
We are diploids.
Diploids, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So triploids, could you explain triploids? What do you mean when you say triploids?
I'm sorry, triploid means that instead of having two chromosome of each pair of chromosomes, you have three.
Three.
Instead of having 46 chromosomes, you'll have 69 chromosomes. And that will imply a lot of problems in a human being.
And how? What problems do you see does it imply in a human being that's consuming these type of foods?
There has been a lot of studies, and depend who you read, and some of them says that that nothing will do harm to human beings, and the reason is you just take that food and go through the gastrointestinal tract, and it will have no contact with your DNA. But I have a problem with that, and the thing is, indeed, there's a history there's data in the evolution of the human being that we have incorporated other organisms into our bodies. For example, our mitochondria were external organisms that were incorporated into our cells, and it was extremely positive for a human being to have an organelle that produces energy for our cells. So it become a symbiotic relationship. And if that happened thousands and thousands of years ago, I don't see why not another genetic information can be stuck into our genome as well.
Also we have the issue of children who would have been diagnosed with attention deficit with hyperactivity, or just even attention deficit. A lot of times, especially I remember when I worked in that area when I lived in Pennsylvania, we always changed their diet. Okay, we always put them on a strict diet, and that actually reduced the hyperactivity in those who were ADHD diagnosed, and even those who were ADD diagnosed, you'd find that they did not even need drugs for them to be able to concentrate, as long as you were able to change their diet.
Can you give me an example of that of the diet? What type of diet you recommend for someone who is diagnosed ADHD or ADD?
That was years ago, but for example, we would push a lot of natural growing vegetables, because then even if you, like Dr. Cornelius shared a while ago, you buy like the corn or some of these in the at the supermarket, those definitely have preservatives in them. So sometimes we encourage the parents to like make their own gardens, and then feed the children off of that. So that's one of the things I can remember offhand.
But I agree with Anselma on this, but first of all, you need to determine, because the autistic spectrum disorder is extremely wide, and it can go from very, very mild to very severe autistic features. And as like you mentioned, few years ago there were many titles to categorize this spectrum, but nowadays with the DSM-5, which is the latest version of the psychiatric catalog for diseases, you either have autism or you don't.
Could you break that down for us, please? DSM-5, we're like third graders to you here. Yes,
the American Psychiatric College have made this catalog of psychiatric diseases, and they just put a number and a definition, a description of what are the criteria in order to have that diagnosis. And the reason is that, contrary to most of physical stuff, mentally stuff or behavioral stuff can be very wide and difficult to diagnose sometimes, because sometimes you have a little bit of, maybe speech delay, but then doesn't have hyperactivity or have non-specific learning disabilities. So what is that child? Is that a child with just speech delay, or it is part of the autistic spectrum disorder?
That leads to my next question. So can a certain psychological or cultural norm be diagnosed as autistic? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if I use the right words, you know what I'm saying? But can you make the picture for me? I don't know if I'm using the right paints, you know what I mean? Can like a certain behavior, like a child who's probably like, more after himself, more quiet, doesn't really...
No, that doesn't necessarily make him autistic. And that's why there's this DSM-5, because there are some specific categories that are psychology or psychiatry.
Such as,
you mentioned speech delay, but also repetitive movements, but also social impairment, meaning that child it's happier very shy, very isolated, doesn't look to play with other children, that stimuli such as very hard noises will make them very scared. So there's a bunch of criteria that it's been in place, and I think it should be followed, because I think we are overdiagnosing autism.
Yes. We are, because I remember...
That's why I asked, no, I didn't know the word, the question, but you answered the question. You know what I'm saying? That's the...
One of the things that you have to remember is that as psychology students, they always said to us, now, don't take the DSM and decide that, oh, I have this and I have that. Okay, because you, according to the DSM, you might have, it depends on what they're diagnosing, you will have to have 3 or 4 of those things repeatedly over a period of time. Okay? Children, there's some children who are shy. So if a child is, if we tend to look at a child and say, okay, that child is withdrawn, are we going to say, okay, well, that child is probably autistic, whereas the child might just be a shy person, or maybe that child just needs a moment to his or herself. So at that point that you're seeing them, so you cannot just go and just decide to just diagnose children or people just because.
I don't want to take up the whole show on just autism, but it's something that's, I have a nephew that, he was diagnosed as autistic, which I didn't really agree with, you know what I'm saying? But how do we, how does autism, how does it affect, let's say you was diagnosed as autistic, how would it affect your future as an adult?
May or may not affect it at all.
Let's say as a college, and your resume, you know what I mean?
Well, first of all, your personal health information.
Hold on 1 second here. I think we have a call coming in here. Let's see if we can get this here without me screwing up the thing here. Talk show. Hello?
Hello. I'm calling. Hello?
Yes, you're live right now. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm calling in to ask, I realize you guys are talking about autism and ADHD, but how does this have to do with trauma? And is it curable, like how trauma is curable?
You guys get that?
Okay.
What was the last part? If it's curable?
Yes, she's asking, is it curable?
How does it relate to trauma?
To trauma. So I guess you would like to hear more about trauma, but the thing is, even autistic children, or children with autism rather, they go through their sets of trauma. And I know we've gotten off the topic a lot, and we'll get right back into it.
Yeah, let's get back on the topic.
Yeah.
Let's get back on the topic.
They are linked one with the other, because a parent who has a child with autism, you find that parent too has his or her set of stresses that they need to deal with. And not only autism, you have children who have diabetes, you have children who have some form of cancer, and all of that can cause stress factors in the family. And as long as these stress factors exist and the parents are not given tools in which to cope, then that stress that the parent is feeling ends up going passed on to the child.
I totally agree with you, but also having a child with any type of behavioral abnormalities, each by itself may become a stress factor within that family nucleus. Because you have a child who do not respond to commands, who cannot answer appropriate. So if you have other siblings, that may affect them as well. And like Ms. Jonna Jala just say, if you don't have the tools to properly manage that, either autism or whatever, it may affect the entire family. And you need to have the tools to recognize that. Okay. I haven't mentioned this, that I think this is where we were going before the call gets in, but it's important to know that once you have autism, you always have autism, if indeed you have autism. As I told you, I think it's been overdiagnosed, and a lot of people have been diagnosed with autism that doesn't necessarily have that. But also there are many other genetic disorders or metabolic disorders that cause autistic behavior. Just to give you an example, and this is well known now, approximately 20% of children with autism do have a metabolic disorder, particularly mitochondrial diseases or fatty acid oxidation disorders, and or have a chromosomal abnormality. It's just that it's such a small abnormalities that unless you do genetic comprehensive hybridization studies, you're not going to be able to identify that abnormality. So you need to identify what is the cause of autism in that person that you're talking or child in order to help him or her to overcome that. Is it curable? No. Can patients improve? Yes. Can they overcome signs and symptoms? Yes.
Okay. And Selma, this is day 3, I guess, of the week-long symposium. So fill us in on what's happened and what's getting ready to happen, because I think we have until the 14th or the 15th of the events.
Yes.
So go ahead and just fill us in on what's happening. I know I've been seeing some postings about Bazaar and all this other kind of stuff.
So on Sunday, we were in St. Thomas. We had a wonderful time there. We had our main speaker, who was Milagros Romero, and she spoke about some of the trauma that she has experienced in her life. We also had what we call counselors on hand, which was a good thing, because some people, when Milagros opened up, some adults began to share as to some of the traumas that they have had, and certain things that she said, it actually sparked some remembrances so we had a really good time. We also had the St. Thomas and John drum corps that played for us, and we had our DJ. So we had an awesome time. The children had lots of activities, and just so that we'll be doing the exact same thing on St. Croix. Yesterday, Monday, we actually had a forum at UVI, and that was awesome also. A lot of things were shared.
And that was headed up by, I think you said Dr. Dora Hamilton. She was the main speaker, I guess, right?
Well, Dr. Dara Hamilton actually served as the moderator.
Okay.
And if you remember Dara from last week, she asked a lot of very interesting questions.
Yes.
She was able to tie everything together. Some of the pointers that were brought out, like Dr. Corner said tonight, is that we really need a collaboration. We really need to be able to get not just the government involved, but we as a people, we need to do it for ourselves. We need to understand where are the resources, what the resources are, how can I make them available to myself and or my neighbors around me. And somebody, I can't remember exactly who, I believe it was Karen Hunt, who brought up the concept of the village, bringing the village back. We also had Clemma Lewis. I'm not too sure how many of you are familiar with her.
Yeah, she's come on our show one time before.
Yeah.
From the Women's Coalition.
Right. And she's a particular favorite of mine. And she also spoke to it, and she said that, we need to now start making sure that we take care of our babies, because we're in the point where babies are having babies, and if we don't take care of our generations right now, what's going to happen to our future?
Okay.
Yeah, and then today we're on the talk show. Tomorrow we'll be on with Robert Moorhead on 9:70 a.m. at 10 o'clock. Thursday we'll be in St. Thomas for that forum over there. The topic of the forum has been how can we affect this generation and future generations by dealing with stress and trauma today.
Okay. So
that is very good. And then we'll end it all on Sunday with a bazaar here in St. Croix, 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock at the Fort Christiansted.
Okay. And Dr. Kinnear, what are you going to be talking about? What day are you going to be on stage? So I guess you came from Puerto Rico just for this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, indeed. I guess I have. I'm a speaker tomorrow night. There's an activity, and again, it's trying to build up, awareness and empowerment to St. Croix healthcare professionals, families, physicians, policymakers. So I'm going to be talking about how this toxic stress and trauma affects child development.
Okay.
So I'm going to focus on child development. I'm going to present a lot of research in a more comprehensive way, and also talk about genetics more very lightweight. Because it's probably only an hour. talk, and I can be talking about genetics forever, if you allow me. As a matter of fact, I give a one-semester course of genetic at the medical school. So
There's a lot to be said about it, eh?
you can tell it's my passion.
Okay.
So whenever you're passionate about something, you can
Yeah.
be talking forever about it.
And we actually have some folks flying in from St. Thomas to St. Croix tomorrow just to hear Dr. Cornier speak.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm looking forward to this phenomenal interaction. And also, one of the reasons I accepted the invitation is that it's a place to explore possibilities and collaborations, and how can I help? How can I be part of the solution? How can we establish collaborations and being innovative in the way we approach this? Because only if you become innovative, you will be able to create feasible and intelligent solutions.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the a newborn, or a kid less than a year old, and I guess they've been identified with some kind of trauma, whatever it may be. So now, what's the next step? What is the process to get this kid back to being normal, if that makes sense?
It does make a lot of sense, and I know Dr. Cornier will address that tomorrow, definitely. But I always say knowledge is power, okay? But then also, we need to also take responsibility, and we need to have that acceptance. So, see, parents have to be able to accept, okay, yes, I can see that there is something wrong, or I know that there is something wrong with me, and I want better for my child. You understand? Now, as long as you see we have these in place, the next step would be the resources available in the community, because we have a lot of resources available in the community. Lots of agencies work with that. You have even the departments of health, human services, education, all of these things. We all work together. You have agencies like VI, Virgin Island Partners for Healthy Families. They also help, they educate and what have you. So, that's one of the things that we really want our parents to realize, that knowledge is power, number one, acceptance, and knowing that no one's calling you a bad parent or an insufficient parent or a parent that's not quite capable.
Capable, yes.
We're just saying, if you really want to help your child, then you will do whatever it takes.
So there's help for the parent and the newborn, or the kid less than a year old,
yes,
basically.
Definitely.
Okay.
If you like Dr. Cornier pointed out in the first place, the internet is there. I mean, like, we have an information highway. So if you notice that the child is not meeting his or her developmental milestones, and by that I mean that the academics, pediatrics, I think, have done that. The AC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So what they have done is that they said, okay, by 1 month old, by 2 months old, these are the different things that this child should be doing. If you see the child is not developing as they should, then okay, maybe it's time for me to call in. Maybe it's time for me to seek help. Maybe when I go to my pediatrician, I need to mention these things to my pediatrician.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to add that pediatrician needs to be aware of this, because as a pediatrician, one of the problem is that we always take, for example, most of the complaints from the parents will be, he is delayed in speech. He hasn't talked, and most of the pediatricians will answer, give him or give her time. And if it's a boy, it's doomed, because we are supposed to speak later, according to oral tradition. There's no proof that boys speak later than girls. So I think that the most important thing is to create awareness and recognition. When there is a problem, we need to recognize it. Whether it's in our hands to solve it or not, we need to recognize that problem, because that's the first step toward amending whatever you want to amend. And it's like when you have a problem with alcohol or drugs, if you don't recognize that there's a problem, you will never improve or never seek help.
How do the population that most needs your services, how they avail themselves of your services? You know what I'm saying? Like, probably, you know what I mean? the poor, the poor population, you know what I'm saying? The population that probably don't have the access to the information to know that you exist, you know what I mean? How did they go about availing themselves of your services?
Well, first of all, let me just make one thing clear. I am here to bring all the community, all the territories, agencies, and sectors together in a collaboration, just so that we know what all the resources that we have or that we have in the territory are.
Is everybody on board with this?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Because of the change in administration right now, we're a little slow in getting it up, but I know that they've all shown an interest in it, so we're getting there.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do is harness, so to speak, all the resources so that when a person goes into, whether it be the clinic or they go into WIC or whatever it is they go into, they can say, look, these are some of the things I've been noticing in my newborn. These are some of the things I've been noticing in my 2-year-old. And then now that person, let's say in the food stamp, can say, I know exactly where you need to go.
Do people who work in the food stamp and WIC services, are they able to identify these problems? You know what I'm saying? Are they able to take in this information and refer it to the proper resources?
Trust me, we have very, very, very profound and knowledgeable people in our different sectors. So yes, they are. The thing is, sometimes they're not too sure exactly where to send that person, and that's what we're here for. We're trying to harness all the resources, bring all the agencies and the sectors together so that when something happens, you know, like when you go to Plaza and they look up for you, oh, you got a mango, let me see, and they key that number in and they could tell you the exact price of that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is kind of like what we're trying to do with that information.
An integration.
highway. Okay?
All right.
And an algorithm. Because if you have an algorithm, you know what is the first step, the second step, the third step, and that should be available to all agencies and healthcare professionals, so people will know where to refer that specific family for that specific problem.
Okay. One of the things I want to ask too is, are we going to develop some kind of database, some kind of online database to keep track of, you know, maybe a parent that will come in tomorrow and say, you know, I think my newborn or my 1-year-old kid, and then we can just sort of put this in an electronic database and keep record of this and just keep notes about progress and medicines and symptoms and reactions and this kind of thing?
A tracking system.
That would be very nice, wouldn't it? That would be very nice.
It makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. So then you know, the parents, you know, well, some of the frustrations I've seen in parents when I visit these different places is that, oh, I have to go through this entire thing again. I just explained it to, and now and then that becomes a frustration and a stress for them.
Yes,
you know?
yes. Have you had anybody, come since you were on here last week and say that, hey, you know, I think my kid has some kind of trauma and started the process with them?
No, I haven't had anybody come tell me that, but I have had people tell me, I saw you last week. Where did I see you? On the internet? Yes. Yeah. And then
kind of off track a little bit.
Yes, and they have told me that they think what we're doing is a good thing because I had one parent actually said to me that she has been saying for years, and I think she's actually a grandparent. She has been saying for years that that's what needs to happen because she's tired of going from one place thinking that these are the services that place offers, and then she has to be turned out and say, no, go over here, and when she goes someplace else. Yeah, so.
Okay. And I just hope that this is going to be some kind of a centralized approach and that you don't have to run everywhere, you know, east, west, north, and south just to get the service that you need. I don't know the specifics behind it, but hopefully it's sort of a one-stop shop for to get better, I guess.
Yeah, it's just like I said last week. We have the text for babies, the word text, TEXT, the number 4, and then BABIES. And right now we have that available in the Virgin Islands. And what a pregnant woman or even a father who's interested in the pregnancy to, I think it's 5-year-old, they can actually text to that number, send a question, sorry, to text for babies and receive an answer.
Okay. And that ends up somewhere, someone's manning a system of some
Yes.
sort to deal with that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Also, another thing that has happened is that we have the postpartum depression. So we had frontline staff trained, and that's something like last night that came up in the forum. They said that that's something they'd like to see come back. So now I guess I'll have to work on a training or a retraining, maybe July, August, work on that. Another thing that we have is we call it the Mothers and Babies course, and that is also something that's very good. So these are some of the initiatives that we have going on right now, and when we get all the agencies and sectors together, these things will really become available, and we'll see how the system really works.
Yeah. One of the things I forgot to ask you when you were here last week was this. So this is a grant, but how long is it? Is it like a 3-year, 1 year, 5 year?
It's a 3-year grant.
Okay.
And the first year was 2013 through 2014. I wasn't on there. I came in at the ending of the grant in June of 2014.
Okay.
So this is me trying to make sure that by the time next year hits, we are ready to go.
Okay. Okay.
Systems.
Okay.
And also, when you have grants, you really want to be sure that you did what you were proposing in that grant in order to have the possibility of applying to other grants.
Yes.
Because that's if you don't, then you lose credibility, and that's very important. I think that what this grant is doing is phenomenal for the Virgin Islands. I commend you on the governor and everyone involved in that, because I think that's what we need. And we need to establish databases, like you just mentioned, because we need to know what our problems are. And if that is in a databases, then we know exactly the incidence and prevalence of X, Y, or Z. We can establish public policies, and we can public health policies for the future and to the better development of not only our children but our adults and our society in the Virgin Islands. So I think it's a phenomenal initiative, and I hope that you do get more grants in the very near future.
So, and the thing is, it's very important for us to hear the voice of the people, okay? Because at the end of the day, we can decide at the front end, okay, this is what we think will work, and if we don't hear your voice, then this is what we think will work. You who are experiencing it, it behooves you to let us know that, look, this is not what's going to work. This is what I think we should do, and this is how I think we should address it.
Okay.
Because it's for the people.
Yes. Between the show last week and today, someone, a friend of mine, asked me, "Is this a free service? To the parent and the child if they came to an office and said, I think my kid has, trauma. Is it free, or there's some minimal cost involved in this?"
Well, for now, there will be a minimal cost, and as I said, what I'm here to do is to make sure that all the systems collaborate.
Okay.
Yes, so I, as much as I love to work with the children and the families, right now I'm just behind the scenes. I'm the one getting the agencies and the sectors to make sure that our families are served adequately.
Okay. Okay.
Can you generalize, using the topic trauma? Can you generalize? Give me just a general definition of what trauma would be in relation to a child and a parent. What were some of the examples you use as trauma?
You want examples or definition or both? Let me do
both.
Let me do both for you. All right. Trauma basically is when you go through an experience.
Not the definition of trauma, but some examples of trauma as relation to,
Physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, drug using, parents with using drugs, that's trauma. Alcoholic parents, that is trauma for the children. And this is adding a lot of toxic stress to those children who are in that family, nuclear family. So, and those are, domestic violence, so all those are clear-cut examples of trauma.
But we also have the other ones, the other underlying ones, like environmental factors. For example, neighborhood violence. You know, a child witnessing maybe somebody fighting or even somebody getting shot. That happened over in St. Thomas on Saturday night, excuse me, was about the hurricane. You know, that could be a traumatic event. You will have like maybe a child in a neighborhood and a dog snaps at that child. That could be a very traumatic event also. You understand? Let me see. So, you know, we have like the ones that we know of that exhibit the various types of abuses that Dr. Corner just said.
Hunger.
But then we have poverty.
Poverty, hungry.
Yes.
Okay. So, Doctor, you're from Puerto Rico, and so, you know, there's millions of people over there. So I would imagine that there's just a grander scale of people coming in that have trauma, I would imagine. So you guys have the facilities for that?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because we do have facilities for a lot of these children or adults that have been suffering trauma, but it's not enough. And then it's a very fractionated healthcare system, the one that we have in Puerto Rico, because some people have government-based healthcare insurance, which will be the equivalence of Medicaid here. We call it Reforma in Puerto Rico, and that is a healthcare system totally different than private medical insurance.
Okay.
We have 40% of our population have private insurance, like 45 to 55 has government insurance, and we have like 10 to 15% of our population that have no insurance at all. So depending what are your type of medical insurance, are the resources that you have available. For example, in the hospital that I work, San Jorge Children's Hospital, we just inaugurated a mental health care unit 2 months ago. So that is not only for acute psychiatric disorders, but also have counseling, has social working. So they're going to cover a lot of behavioral abnormalities and social stress and trauma to children. It's only for children.
Okay. And you said there's going to be a general cost in availing yourself of these. How is there any does government insurance, does MAP will cover these costs? You know what I mean?
Definitely. You just remember, right? This grant that we have is just to ensure that trauma and stress in children is given consideration. It's looked at and it's not swept under the rug that like has been in past years. Okay, that is the most important thing to remember about this entire thing. If you forget everything else, just remember that here we are to make sure that trauma is no longer a bad word in our society. And if you're going through it, because we all have some kind of traumatic experience we can relate to or we can speak about or maybe even still haunts us today, and it's because it was not dealt with appropriately when we were younger that sometimes we still have that.
Okay. Is the hospital here involved in this too?
Next question.
Okay.
Sorry.
How would you identify if if this trauma, if it affected you in your if you experienced it early in years, how would you know how is this trauma affecting you as a grown person or as a young adult, teenager, or a grown person? How would you know that that there's a certain trauma that's causing a certain behavior?
Sometimes you don't know, and this is one of the great things about this grant is trying to create awareness, recognition of such a word named trauma, and that is not a bad thing. Sometimes you are not even aware, and it's not until you filled out a form, a document that asks you questions, and then when you start asking those questions, you realize, oh my God, I've been exposed to this, and the reason I react to this situation X, Y, or Z is because I was exposed to this. A lot of people go into denial, and again, a lot of the trauma that we are exposing our children are not even called trauma, or they're not considered trauma. And so people is not aware of that. So there are psychological documents and forms that you can fill, And actually they are available for free in internet.
Okay.
So if you reach internet and you look for those, the CDC in Atlanta have a whole division trying to create awareness of this.
Yeah.
Harvard have a child developing institute, and a lot of their documents you can download them for free. And you can fill them up. And if you see that you have X amount, 5, 6, or 7 of those categories that you answer yes, then maybe you should discuss this with your medical health professional and or your psychologist or a counselor. And if you're a child, maybe with your student counselor at a school, even your teacher. You'd be surprised of how many patients got referral to a geneticist because the teacher were the ones who noticed.
So trauma is more or less along a medical line, right? Medical, you say is psychological, medical. Would you put it all under the same?
No, it can be true medical. There's evidence that trauma effect can predispose you to get diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer.
Okay, so now if it's medical, you would think that the hospital would need to be involved. And how can we get the hospital involved in this? If how integral is it for the hospital to be involved for it to work?
The hospitals should always be involved in anything of this nature. Always be involved, okay? And since you're the voice of the people, I'll ask you, how can we get the? You're the voice of the people, my dear. How can we get the hospitals involved?
Excuse me.
Tell me.
How many letters do you have to your name? I think you're the professional. I think you're the one who, this is the forum for you to at least voice, how important it is for the hospital to be involved in order for this to work, because, it's very important, I think.
I agree with you, and like I keep saying to everybody, you, the people, the Virgin Islanders, okay, you need to make sure that the government works for you, because we are your servants. That's why we're put there. Therefore, whereby, if there's such a grant out there and you know that it is to get all agencies and sectors, which would include the hospital, involved, then it's up to you to start voicing, write to the newspapers, come on this talk show, and ask, why isn't it happening? And I want to know how I can make it happen.
I don't know about the specific of hospitals here in St. Croix or in the Virgin Islands, but one of the most frequent reasons why hospitals, institutions do not provide, or they're not that into collaboration and into pediatric, is because they're not focused on pediatrics, and there's a lot of adult healthcare system in place, but there's very little pediatric. For example, I know for a fact that there are very little, if any, pediatric subspecialists in the island. So we need to develop that infrastructure, because it's not until that happens that you create awareness of diseases or problems that happens in childhood.
Okay.
And then hospitals may become on board, because you have to create, and again, I love the word recognition, because it's not until you recognize that you are lacking something that you start working toward, improving that.
Yeah. Let me ask you too, Doc. What about the treatment of someone that is experiencing trauma? I mean, I guess there's counseling, and then maybe at some point, maybe there's some medicine prescribed. How does that part work? Is there like a step you go through to get there?
Well, it depends how bad trauma affects you.
Okay.
Because just to give you a very simple example, maybe only if that child who has been exposed to trauma have one loving relationship, only one, even if the rest of his world or her world is falling apart, that may be enough to prevent that toxic stress from developing, long-term consequences. Because then that child will take that toxic stress and develop something called resiliency. And so if we identify that problem, maybe just identify one family member, one social worker, one teacher, one neighbor that provide that loving, caring, safe environment, that may be enough to prevent that child from developing ulterior problems. But if it came to that, then you need to go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a neurologist, depending on what type of the problems we're talking, and get medicated. If you cannot manage your anxiety, then you need medication.
You need medication.
So, for your segment, I'd like to ask you, so what you're basically saying is if we invest more in pediatrics, we'll probably head off a lot of the problems that we face in later life then.
Sure.
Okay.
If you don't invest in pediatrics, you are not investing in your island or in your country.
Healthcare system, period.
Period. Because you are going to have a very doomed future, healthy from a health perspective.
So this
that should be the focus of healthcare system in any country.
So this program is generally then trying to effect that change from the pediatric level.
Yes.
That's what your program is.
Yes.
Okay.
We could say that because the thing is, right? Let me tell you the progression of this grant. Many years ago, about I think was it 10 to 12 years ago, the federal government said, okay, let's take care of our youth. But then when they sent out this grant, they realized, okay, there's still something missing. So they decided, okay, let's go through junior high. But they realized, okay, elementary. And now they're realizing that this trauma and stress that we've been trying to take care of in the youth so that they will not go on to jail and they will become productive citizens, they realize that started from the time the child was in the womb. Okay. So that's where we're at now, trying to make sure that, okay, let's get this system in place, let's get it intact so that we can affect the generations to come.
Is this something related to or works in parallel with Early Head Start? I mean, is that,
yes.
How does that all kind of fit together there?
It fits together because then, and that's, I guess last week I should have mentioned that, and I didn't, and I had to apologize to my Early Head Start and Head Start folks. But we have formed that collaboration already, and we have been having lots of different talks to see, okay, what are some of the things that we can do, and we're beginning to realize that our teachers, we need to help them take care of themselves, and that's what we call self-care. So they have come on board already, and now we're talking about, okay, how can I help you? What it is that you need that I can provide or I can assist with.
Okay.
So that's one of them.
Someone was asking about, I guess we were talking about the hospitals, but I guess the other medical entities here, the Federal Health Clinic, Department of Health Human Services, have they kind of,
oh, yes.
Are they along or they're still questioning?
No, they're along.
Okay.
We've here in St. Croix we have Frederickstead Healthcare Inc. and in St. Thomas we have East End Medical. Okay. They've gotten on board since last year.
Okay.
The Department of Human Services, they're on board. As you see, we had Dr. Brackwitt last week.
Okay.
And so they are definitely on board. The Department of Education, they're coming on board. The Department of Human Services, they're coming on board, and health. Okay. So we do have all of us getting together. We just need maybe the private sectors to come on. Okay. And especially for us now, we really need the pediatricians because they would need to be able to tell us what it is that we should be looking for, what it is we should be looking at, and they would be able to direct us in that awareness on how we should address it. Okay.
And the community needs to come on board. It's basic, because if you don't demand what you need, no one will give you anything.
Give you what you need,
Not only that, but the ultimate responsibility of a child, it's their parents.
Okay.
And we need to, it doesn't matter how much the system want to work. It doesn't matter how much the private sector or the physicians or anyone want to work. If we don't have that healthy nurture environment in the family, it's not going to happen.
And I agree with Dr. Cornier because we can have everything in place. For example, we have the bazaar coming up. We have the forums. And, for example, last night we had folks from DHS and DOE and DOH. We had all these folks, but I did not see the community. And the community needs to come on.
Oh, so
we
the
need to
community
hear-
part of that was a little low in
A
attendance?
little low. I think we had about maybe 3 or 4 parents that I actually identified.
Oh, really?
Who
Wow.
did not work in that sector.
Okay.
And you know, the thing is, we need you out. We need to hear your voice.
Mhm.
Because if I don't know what exactly you're experiencing, I can say, okay, let's do the text for babies, and let's do the postpartum depression, and let's do the mothers and babies course. And then whereas there are some fathers out there who want a fathers and babies course too. You
Yes.
understand what I'm saying? So we really need the community
To
get on board.
getting more involved.
Is recognition a part of the reason why the community? Because you see, you need to recognize that you have a problem in order to deal with the problem. So, how do you get the community to recognize that they need? You know what I mean? They need to be a part of this.
Well, I believe that maybe on a long term or in the future, you need to develop an education, advertisement through the media, radio, TV announcement, newspapers, article in newspaper. In my experience in Puerto Rico, radios work better than newspapers. Or then go to the community and give a lecture or a forum in that community. Because sometimes we are very lazy in Puerto Rico. And people don't go anywhere. If you don't go to them first, excuse me, once you motivate them, then they will come. But you have to go to them because sometimes there's no recognition.
Sometimes people just like convenience.
Exactly. But then again, if you're talking about a child of yours, I mean, what could be more powerful for you as a human being to move you? If your children don't do that for you, you need to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Because you have a serious problem.
Okay. And Selma?
Sir.
Go ahead and, I guess one more time, wrap it all up. What has happened already? What will be happening?
So what has happened, we've had the bazaar in St. Thomas, and upcoming, the bazaar in St. Croix, which will be June 14th, 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock, Fort Christiansted. Come out. We have a lot of activities for the children. We have giveaways. We have gifts that were donated from other agencies and sectors. There you go. Coming together. So come on out because we have that information, and plus we want to hear from you. If you don't come, then we don't know what you need. Okay? Then what has happened in St. Croix, the forum, which was last night, we had a lot of feedback, and I'm definitely going to make sure that we follow up. Some folks text me today and they said, well, how soon can we follow up? Can we do something in July? Yes, we will try our best to bring something to the community in July and then again in August. Well, upcoming forum, St. Thomas, Thursday, Windward Passage, 6 o'clock. Be there, and there'll be refreshments. We had a lot of refreshments last night. Thank you very much, UVI. Tomorrow morning, we'll be on Robert Moorhead's show, 9:70 a.m. at 10 o'clock. Dr. Cornier will be there. You can call in so that you have questions for him. Show us that you are listening. Then on Wednesday night, Dr. Cornier will actually be presenting to the pediatricians, the Department of Education, Department of Human Services, Department of Health, which would include mental health. And I have some parents there also, so that we can see that this is serious, and he'll help us identify some factors.
His forum is, Doc, your forum is more for other doctors, that safe to assume?
And healthcare professionals.
Okay.
And teachers.
And okay. So they're the frontline
Frontline
professionals dealing with this stuff. Okay. Well, I think that'll do it. As always, we would just like to ask our guests, is there anything else that you'd like to say or mention that we forgot to ask? We're not professional talk show hosts, so we always have to ask.
I would just like to, just if, slightly if you could touch, how teachers, because I lately have, teachers, how are you going to get, how are you going to get teachers on board, and what curriculum would you expect from the teachers to make this thing work?
I will tell you something. Our teachers definitely need some resilience training, and they've asked for it, and it's coming.
Thank you.
Our teachers definitely need some self-care. They've asked for it, and it's coming.
Okay.
They need to be empowered as well, because No, I mean that's the professional that spend the more
This
time with our children.
Yeah.
So they are the best professional to identify this
Yeah.
type of problems.
Yeah.
You have to remember, okay, when we're talking about adults going through their trauma and their stresses, the teachers have that too, because they are human, you know, and then yet still they come every day and they take care of that child, you know, for the parents, because they're the parent in the absence of that parent.
Yeah.
So as a teacher, you know, being traumatized, having to deal with trauma, do you think there's a chance, there's a high possibility that teacher somehow passes that trauma on to the students? Do you think that's a possibility? You know what I mean? As if you say they're human and they're in the same traumatized society, going through the same things, do you think there's a, you know, is there a forum to deal with that if that's an issue?
As adults, we all pass on our traumas and our stresses, knowingly and unknowingly, consciously and unconsciously, to all the people around us.
We come in contact with.
Okay? So just imagine what we're passing on to the children. Because you see, I'll say, okay, Dr. Corner, right now, I cannot deal with this. So I can voice and tell him about the trauma, whatever it is that I feel like I'm getting off of him. And do you think a child can do that? In our society, what are they taught? To be quiet, right? So they will not do that. So the child will just stay there and take everything. And then when you have the child who will verbalize, then we call that child rude.
Rude. You're talking too much. Yeah.
Too much.
Yeah.
Mind your business.
So
What's wrong with you? Go sit down. Be quiet.
So, as teachers have to come in contact, you know what I mean, so there's a curriculum in place, some process in place to help teachers deal with this, you know what I mean, to make sure that they're not a part, you know what I mean, of the problem. 'Cause that to me, that's kind of a, you know, a problem right there. If you have the teacher who's supposed to be helping, you know what I mean, solve these problems, or is it a teacher's place to have to deal with these problems?
That's why I actually mentioned the resiliency and the self-care training. Those are coming.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Make the teacher a little more aware, I guess, of their own self and the students and the differences.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Dr. Dahlia Brathwaite and I will actually working on something called Hurt to Healing, and we want to present it to the Department of Education so that somehow or the other we will get the teachers trained in that department.
Okay. All right. So it's about 9:27 p.m. Once again, any final thoughts, Doc or Anselma?
Turn my mic off.
I just want to thank you all for the
Okay.
opportunity, and I would like to tell the population of the Virgin Islands that get out, get loud, recognize whatever it's going on in your nuclear family, and be, you know, empowered. Empower, become it. There's nothing to be ashamed. We're all human beings, and we all need help at one point or another. So there are a lot of resources out there in the community. Reach out for them.
And to the young lady who called in, thank you so much for getting us back on track, because I really think we kind of like got lost there a little bit. And to all to everybody out there, I just want to let you know that we are here. Something is trying to be done, and if you just keep quiet about it, then we don't know how to you see best that we can help you. We can just do what we think you need. So be the voice, be your voice, be the voice of the child, you know, be the voice of the family member who's going through something, and let us know. Come out on Sunday, that would be June 14th, 12 through 4 at Fort Christiansted.
Okay, so we'll leave it there. I want to thank you guys again for coming out. Nice meeting you, Doctor. And Anselma, thank you for coming out. Keith, thanks for co-hosting tonight with us here on the It's Your Perspective talk show. Any final words, Keith?
No? It's
No.
a pleasure meeting Miss Anselma, Miss Anselma,
John
Ayala,
yes.
and Dr. Cormier. Is a pleasure. You know what I'm saying? I think, you know, is a great correlation. You know what I mean? The community really needs it, and we look forward to, you know.
Pleasure to meet you both as well.
Yes.
Thank you.
On that note, it's about 9:30 p.m. on Tuesday, June 9th. This is the It's Your Perspective talk show every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow night. We do have another guest lined up. So on that note, we're out. Have a good evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace.